Coming up in the latest episode of Netball Unlocked, we review round 7, look ahead to round 8, and we've got a very special co-host stepping in with Chloe on her Olympic travels in Canada. Hello and welcome back to a different looking Netball Unlocked today, not least because it's the first time either Chloe or I have been absent for one of these, and you'll see by now that my guest and my co-host for the whole journey here is the person responsible for me being involved in netball in some way. Tamsin Greenway. I could give you the full spiel, but I think I'd run out of time. Sky Sports Off the Court co-host, London Mavericks franchise director, England Academy assistant coach. Where does it all end? How are you, first of all?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me. It's nice. It's nice to do this. It's nice to not lead it, to be here and chat. I like it.
Nice to be a guest for once, right? So look, with Chloe off on her travels, very excitingly reporting about curling in Canada, which is something very interesting. It's a chance for you and I to have a little bit of a chat, and I've called the podcast When Podcasts Collide. And I think that's quite a good place to start because you and I have chatted long and hard, right? I think when I first had to cover netball for Sky, one of the first conversations I had with you was, tell me about this sport, where does it go, what can it be? And I suppose that's my first question to you again this time. Where do you think the sport finds itself now? Which is a nice, easy one to start with, right?
Just a small little topic to get going. Well, it's very different from when we had our first conversation. It was very different from when I first started playing what we thought was going to be sort of professional netball. So, I mean, we've made huge changes. I still think, and I say it all the time, that the sport is still, to me, like a blank piece of paper. It's still that really exciting sport that could really go where we want it to go, but it's going to take a massive joint approach. And I think the launch of the 2.0, I was really positive about it and still really positive about it. We needed to do it. We needed to rip the Band-Aid off. We needed to be fearless with some of the things we wanted to do. And we also need to give it time. Because we were never, ever going to be in a position to just launch a fully perfect professional league and everybody just go, oh, wow, isn't this wonderful? And I think there's been some major step forwards this year. Of course, there are still things we want to improve and work on. But in terms of the sport, the shift that we've seen and the vision that we've had is for the first time ever something I could really get behind and think we're actually going to get it there. So it's moved on. It still needs to keep moving on. But I think for the first time ever, we've got an end goal.
I think that's the point, right? I think every time we've spoken to someone so far, and I'm sure you guys have done the same, it's been a case of, look, it's okay to start somewhere. And I think at each point, it's fine to take 2 steps back. It's fine to take maybe 4 or 5 steps forward, as long as we learn each time. So I think one question we've kind of asked everyone as well is, rather than 10, 15 years, where would you like to see us maybe a couple of years down the line, 2 or 3 years down the line from here? What steps forward? What evolution? What do you think we'd like to have learned even in a couple of years' time?
I think from a performance point of view, it be fully professional across the board in terms of all the athletes, because we're still not there yet. And I think people forget, like, they see SSN now as shiny and new. I was there when ANZ started. We were still training in schools. We were still playing in exhibition centres that weren't our own venues. We still had players in the squad that worked. We still had we still had a massive mix of levels of players from where we were internationally as English players back then. So I mean, they did all this. They've done all this already, and that's really where we're starting point. The only other way you could have done it was to get millions and millions and millions of pounds of investment with someone with a never-ending checkbook and going, okay, spend and do what you want. And even then, you're asking players to transition so quickly. So I think from a performance point of view, within the next 2 or 3 years, you'd want to have a full squad of 10 that are only doing netball. That's your first goal. And that's a massive shift mentally for players as well, because there's still players out there that want to have careers in other things and want to be doing other stuff. So that's going to be quite interesting. I think from a club point of view, the stability of your training venues, the programming, how Super League links into Next Gen, how the pathway runs, stability in your coaches and your support team. And then for me, the consistency in a fan base. So, shouldn't be a slog to get 3,500 people into Wembley in 3 years' time. We should be at 5,000 and be able to do that when we put on a Wembley game. We shouldn't have to constantly be pushing the agenda for people to watch and show up and do, and once you've got that consistent fan base that are talking about netball in a different way, and you hit all those three-pronged approaches, we're in a much, much better space, and that should be realistic in 2 to 3 years' time.
So I suppose the logical question for you is when you were part of the kind of process of putting the franchise bid together and how you got involved in that, kind of what was the strategy for Mavericks in terms of where they go and what they want to do?
Well, Mavericks was quite interesting because I don't know whether it's just me, but it seemed to have this effect. Obviously, when we tendered, we were Saracens, and then within weeks that had been pulled, and suddenly we were London Mavericks, and Lucy and Olivia came in and just went, right, this is what we're going to do. And we all sat around a table and everyone was putting in ideas about the tender, and then we've kind of just ran with it. They've got a really clear vision, which is very exciting. It's all fan-based, fan-led, making sure the experiences are different, how we treat people, how we build a culture. It's really exciting. But I think for us, the journey will be different because, there's a performance element. There's 2 London clubs now, so that, you want to be up there and challenging. But we also stripped back that whole team and said, right, we're going to start young. We're going to do something different. We're going to build something special. So I think for Mavericks, although there is an overall vision, there'll be how we get there will be really interesting. And I've even with how I've dealt with performance with them been challenged on that. And it's kind of like, well, we are building, this is what we want to do. And we've both challenged each other backwards and forwards about what that's going to look like. And I love that because you're all invested in the same sort of overall goal, but how you get there will always be a little bit of a roller coaster. So I think, what I'm really passionate about is Mavericks as a brand is doing things differently, which I think is really exciting. The owners are so involved, CEO Kieran as well, like they are fully invested, fully back that, the board are as well. And it makes it quite an exciting journey, but it is very much about the fan experience.
Two questions related to that. One, you guys have kind of been here, there and everywhere in the early part of the season. Is that intentional? Is that something that will continue? How do you position yourself? Because you obviously mentioned London as part of that.
Yeah, well, I think it's every. I think every club has their different challenges, don't they? If you're linked to a university, or you're linked to a football club, or you're linked to a rugby club, it's going to be different kind of investment than. Or if you've been around for 20 years, it's very different to a team that's sort of starting again. So, I think venue wise, we need to see what works. I don't think it's one size fits all. There are things where hands have been forced because we don't own a venue, so it's dates and what you can get and what that looks like. There's then the fan theme that actually, we went out to Brentwood and it sold out within 24 hours. They hadn't had a game out there, so that was really exciting. We went down to Brighton and it was incredible. We had over 2,500 people in that arena, and after everything that happened with Surrey Storm and the South, like that was really exciting as well. Wembley is a whole different kettle of fish, right? We have to keep pushing that agenda. We've got our game there against Pulse on the 11th of May, and we still want to get record numbers in there for us, and we're still pushing that. And then we've got to back up another one for Thunder. So there is so much going on. I don't think anything's been written yet, and I think that's the whole point. You have to try stuff so that in 3 years, like we say, we have got that consistency. We know what works. We know what the fans want. We know what the players want. There's when you link that to performance straight away, is it a disadvantage to play at different venues and you train in different venues? Might be, might not be. That might be something that is just part of being a Maverick. So I think for us, it's there's lots of different reasons around it. And I also think that until netball really finds what works, and I think that's for lots of female sports, I think you've got to do some trial and error and see what happens.
I think that's been one thing that's sort of speaking to yourself. We spoke to Karen Gregg, Lauren Palmer, and also Sam Bird. Lots of people who've been involved in the game for such a long time at varying levels. And I think that ability to kind of test and trial and pivot and practice, I think is super important. Perhaps most important of all is what you put out on the court, because you want people to come in and you want to watch. And obviously as athletes and people involved in performance, you want victories. So when it came to putting the squad together, how How did you go about that process? Because you mentioned sort of ripping things up and starting again, so to speak, but it seems quite clear that you've got a young core, and the aim is for that to grow over a period of time.
Yeah, I think there's different ways of looking at it, isn't there? When I came into the role, I think Mavericks hadn't been in a top four since 2016. And you look at the list of players that just shouldn't have happened, and it kind of became that standard piece, didn't it? And been quite open and honest about that when I first started working for them, and there's been a lot of change, a hell of a lot of change, and sometimes it's not just about the players and the quality of the players, it's all having the same goal and vision. And I think that's what's been great about London Mavericks, is sometimes when you get shiny and new, just like London Pulse did, just like we did at Wasps, just like we did at Surrey Storm, you get the opportunity to strip it back and start again and decide what you want. And actually we looked at it last year and sort of said, okay, like every team, you look at it each year and go, how can you compete, how can you win, how can you challenge? And it's no disrespect to any of the players that didn't stay, and there was lots of reasons players were left and were doing different things, and it was more about, okay, well, this is where we're at. The shooter was a prime example, right? Most teams have to have an import shooter. We know that. So what do you do in that situation? You know, the shooters are few and far between around the world, and Emily Andrew was someone I was talking to her agent about, and I was like, I love the idea of this. Like, let's get someone in and let's give her a different opportunity. And, you know, Emma Thacker and Emily Andrew together, I think they're both still only 22. I mean, so, you know, they've got so much potential. You think how long it takes for a shooter to develop, perform, and how amazing they're doing already. And that for me was a real sort of exciting challenge, that going, well, we could either go with some element of experience but almost know what you're getting, or go, we don't know what we're getting yet, and let's do something a little bit different. And that's what I love, and they are absolutely thriving and getting better and better every week, and the joy of working with them is just incredible. And I think that's what needed to happen at Mavericks. We needed to get the fun back, maybe the excitement back, and I think we've been able to do that this year.
You've obviously got a pretty experienced coaching setup as well, and your position. I had a really good chat with Vic Burgess actually a couple of weeks ago about kind of that empowerment of having some really strong voices around her. How good is that for you guys, yourself, Mickey and Camilla, who have just bags and bags of Super League experience?
Well, again, I've always said this, like, in netball, it kind of like seems to be one size fits all. You were supposed to just be a coach, and with that, you're supposed to be able to tactically coach, technically coach, work at elite level, work at junior level, know about scouting, know about attack, defence. I mean, the list was endless. Oh, and then you just throw a director of netball role in as well, where you're supposed to know about courts, fan base. Like, it just goes on. And I love the fact that, again, that is shifting, that actually it's not just about having one coach sitting at the top trying to do everything, which is also just bonkers. And actually, it was one of the reasons I stepped away from Wasps after the first 2 years, because I was done. Like, it was just mentally ridiculous, the amount of effort you put into not only leading a team, playing a bit, coaching it, the player management piece, and then helping run a club. It was just insane. And I don't envy any of the coaches that are still in that position. I think surrounding yourself with experience and understanding what your strengths are, like me, Mickey and Cam are all completely different personalities. We all offer something completely different, which can only be a benefit to the players, because they can pick up on the bits that they need from each. There's different levels of experience across that group. There's different levels of expertise. You know, my strength is still my analysis, so that's really helpful in that sense. But they bring in so much other stuff. They both cover an area in attack and defence, and we all kind of work together. And that's been a massive learning curve as well, like how we work together and how we present that to the players. But again, if you're prepared to kind of just jump 2-footed in and see what happens and be really open and honest and accountable about that, you get to really good places. And we're still working out like how match day works and how the sessions work and who's best at delivering this and who the players go to for what. And that for me is really exciting as well, because you don't look at any other professional sport, or male professional sport in particular, that just has one person. You know, they're constantly, you're at the rugby, they've got 6 analysts going, you know, with the lead one there. You've got a scrum coach, a line out coach attacking. You know, it happens in every sport, and yet for netball it just seemingly meant that you just had to do that. So I think that's been a real refreshing change as well, and something I'm thriving on, because it means I get to do a bit of coaching. I also get to do sort of leading the performance bit as well, which is really nice, and I get to work with two really talented young coaches.
You get to use your touchscreen in the training environment.
We have live
the touchscreen.
We have live feedback, which I absolutely love. So my PA team are brilliant as well. They're absolutely amazing, Izzy and Ismail. And we have live feedback. So we literally have everything recorded, and we can stop, go over to the screen. We can touch and draw on it.
Nice.
Talk about, so we do that during training, and we're actually working out how that works in the match day environment as well. So that's quite exciting. It's unknown. It's not anything we've done before. And you have to be really trusting with that as well, because that is like, well, hang on, where does that fit? What do we need from this? And sometimes it works, and sometimes you're like, no, I didn't like that at all. But I think that's the exciting piece for me. That again, netball doesn't have that blueprint, so we're designing our own. How cool is that?
Yeah, that evolution is something I know Chloe will be gutted she's missing out on this conversation, because she absolutely loves that side of things and kind of getting under the skin. Look, we could, as we have done now for a fair while, we've been talking about kind of netball and where it goes, but I've got you here to talk about the season so far as well. We'll go into a few other bits and pieces in due course. But what are your thoughts on the new rules, Tamsin? Where do you stand? Like, I think broadly, tactical timeouts, super shots, and kind of maybe the bonus point defeats. They were the three things that kind of feel the most significant. Where have you come down on the three of those?
Bonus points I'm all for. Like, I think you should be rewarded for getting within a certain amount and not having the blowout games. Not that you're ever trying to have a blowout game, but I think, you know, when you have so many close games, there should be kind of reward for that, because they could go either way. So I think that's brilliant. Tactical timeout I'm all for. I actually think it has helped the game. I think when quarters have started to get away, or there's been situations, I know I've really enjoyed it when I've had a couple of games on the bench where we've been able to use that effectively as well. So that's good. We did one at Manchester Thunder on Monday night when, you know, the third quarter was starting to get away, and just to be able to shift that momentum, I think it's really important. And I think you know, you have to be very switched on to when to use that as well. So that's a learning curve for all of us involved. Super shot, I still love. Like, I mean, I was very vocal about this at the start. The super shot was never ever going to make goal for goal games. There is nothing in the world that you can do in any sport that will guarantee you close games. You just can't, because you can't. There's too many variables about who's playing well, what's happening, how you tactically match up. Just one of those games, right? We've all watched a sport where you're like, what happened there? So you can't do goal for goal games. I think we've got to give it time. I think we're advanced over here just because we've always shot from further out. You know, we haven't got to the point where Australia, you know, with some of the targets they have, Janelle and Grace Nweki, like, we don't have those kind of tall athletes. You know, we have Mary, she's now gone overseas. I know there's Alma Ray, but I mean, we don't have that across the board. So we've always, even as an England squad, we've shot from longer distance because we've played more of a rotating circle. So I think we're always going to be more advanced in there. I also think there's an element of defensively, it's probably harder to shoot against it in SSN just because of the level, height and experience of some of the circle defence overseas. And I think that's something you'll see shift here, so it won't become as easy. And I think you've even seen it, like Nicola Smith and Josie Huckle, I think, caused massive disruption in the last couple of weeks on Super Shot just because of their range and their lean on it. But I think in terms of the excitement and how it goes, I think that was the whole point, right? We were trying to bring some kind of extra level of entertainment to the game. So does it matter that every game's not goal for goal because of the super shot? I don't think so. I don't think there's any mimics here. Unlike when I used to watch in Australia where they used to pass out and in for about 10 minutes. I actually think here you get players that turn and shoot it. And the very nature, if that's what we want to see, because I've been at internationals where everyone's going shoot, you know, when the shooters want to get it right under the post. And actually we've now created a game where you do shoot. And you've also created an opportunity for smaller players to re-enter the circle. And I'm all for that as well. So I would say give it a couple of years and see what happens. But I think ultimately there's excitement around it. And when it does come down to it in certain games, it's It's good, right? It's really
I've
good.
enjoyed it. I have to say, I cover, as you know, I cover an awful lot of sports, and for me, it wasn't so much the ability to turn really good athletes into great super shot kind of exponents, because I've always said, you give athletes a chance to practice something and get good at it, they'll get good at it. For me, the element of jeopardy that it brought into the game, I thought, was just something a little bit different. You mentioned it there, kind of the Aussies are used to just kind of taking it down court, scoring all the time. I do think in a sport that is still trying to find its broader audience, and I hate that brush, but we kind of do need to tap into that. I think bringing in an element of doubt and an element of jeopardy and an element of kind of, oh my goodness, did you see that, is something that the sport can take forward. So I've enjoyed it. I'm with you. I do think one or two people are starting to turn. I'm not sure Chloe's for turning at the moment yet, but
Well, you know what? All you have to look at is how excited the players get when they
yeah,
score a 2-point shot. And I'm like, that's what you wanted, right? You wanted to see excitement and atmosphere and engagement, and I think you're getting it. Love it or hate it, you know, when someone scores a super shot, everyone's very excited.
but
Even
this is again.
maybe
This
with
goes
a
back to kind of dabbing up. Yeah, this is something you and I spoke about when we first spoke. Right, we wanted to get you want to get people excited and get people involved and carry storylines. And even for me, as a bit of a kind of football statistician in my past life, like to be able to now go through numbers and details when the information is made available, you can kind of look at things and kind of see what's happening and tell stories and do things in different ways. And it will come on to my next point shortly, which was kind of one I saw this week about kind of two things related. England Netball obviously brought out their details around the participation levels, which is fantastic. You and I were at a county tournament in Bedford on Saturday, and it was brilliant to see so many young girls there enjoying themselves. An incredible standard of netball across two age groups, under 14s and under 16s. You said to me immediately, how do we turn all these people into fans? So kind of how do we do that? And then tied to that was a Sky Sports survey this week as well, which was talking about how actually fans now are happy to consume both men's and women's sport. But as we've discussed loads, and everyone has discussed, netball is almost exclusively a female sport, and it does offer these incredible stories, these incredible opportunities. So I suppose, again, another big picture question is how do you mash those two things together, right? How do you turn those hundreds of girls and parents who were at a netball tournament on Saturday with this apparent desire, according to this survey, to read and find out about brilliant female sports stories? There you go. Answer that question for me.
There you go. Well, I think the biggest piece for me is getting the consistency right. So this year we're showing all games, right? So that's the first piece, and we're showing them all, so they're all there. So that's brilliant. You've then got the consistency on the stories, the stats. I split it into two things, right? There's actual sport, which is you talk about the game, you break the game down, you back that up with stats, you rate players' performances, you talk about the ins and outs, the nitty gritty, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I still think there is a place for that in female sport. Whether it's necessarily what my 11-year-old daughter cares about, that's a different story. Now, what she does care about is what the girls are wearing, how they're doing their hair, still how they play on court, giving them a signature afterwards, giving them time to speak to each other. Oh, what's their other job? What do they like to do? Do they have a dog? You know, all that kind of stuff. They're two completely different things. They're the lifestyle piece. I think for female sport, we have seesawed from that for so long.
Yeah.
So it's like, right, we're just going to now just pump loads of lifestyle stuff at you. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't really tell the story of the season or the sport or whatever. Or then it's like, we start getting a bit heavier on sort of the data and the performance, and it's, you know, we don't want to be saying that about. So it's like, I just think you need consistency of both. That's something I've always tried to do at Sky. I got heavily involved in the analysis, and they were amazing at giving me an opportunity to do that. And it meant we could tell stories in a way where we could, you know, back that up with data, provide opinions, get people debating and talking. This year is probably the first year, again, consistently, we've been able to do link all that together by getting on the Sky Sports News show, which is massive, right? To have netball on hitting on a football audience every week, to have our analysis go out every week as it's going, and to have our podcast go out every week. And now we're getting different podcasts as well, which jump and delve into different things. Like my podcast wouldn't be talking about this, but it allows me to have the relationships with the players and talk a little bit more about the behind the scenes kind of, it's everybody's coming at a different angle, which is brilliant. We want that, but we want that consistency and we want it to stay. And then you want it to build and grow and develop. I think it's quite interesting because I'll say it again, we don't have a blueprint for netball. I think it's quite easy to chat about some of the other female sports because they cross over so easily. Football to football, there is still a general mould of how football's shown. You're not going to suddenly get like a different camera angle or a different way of talking about it or whatever. Whereas actually in netball, you can still do that stuff and you can still be quite brave with some of that stuff. So I think for me, we almost don't know what we don't know yet. But until you get that consistent piece, you're never going to change it. And interestingly, at that Bedford tournament, I was speaking to one of the groups, one of the teams, and I was like, they were chatting about Manchester Thunder. They were from Greater Manchester. And I was like, oh, amazing. They were like, oh, they've got a game on Monday. I was like, yes, they have. And they were like, oh, who are they playing? And I was like, well, actually, like, oh, right, we're playing you. I'm like, yeah. And they were like, well, who are you? So we were chatting about that. And then I said, who's your favourite player? And they named 3 players that don't play for Thunder. And they'd also been to see Thunder 3 times. And I went, who's your favourite player that plays for Thunder? And they couldn't name one. And that's not a problem, but it still shows us where we're at. And my question to you was, how many of these players come to watch our games? And we're talking about 7 games in 5 months. Like, literally, that's what we're asking people to commit to. You could come to 7 home games in that period of time. And we still don't have that consistent fan base doing it. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done. But I don't think until we actually decide on what we're trying to do and stick to it, for example, are we trying to get eventually 15,000 people in Wembley? Or are we happy that if every year we get 5,000 to every single game, but we also get 1 million views on YouTube and we get 1 million people clinking into TikTok that's sponsored up to the high hole, that we get everybody branded up in netball kit that actually plays netball? Like, is that good enough? Is that what we're actually trying to achieve? Because I'm still not sure we know. And I think it all links in together. I think if we get that one vision, we could actually start mimicking things. I do think it has changed though. And I'll go back to this. I don't think we've ever publicly talked about this, but remember when we were doing 2019 World Cup in Liverpool and England had gone like, we have to win it. Like, that was the goal. We ultimately have to win it. And they didn't. They got bronze, which was amazing. We were there. Liverpool was the best experience ever. And I think we chatted and we were like, do we say it? Do we put the elephant in the room and go, great tournament, but you didn't win? And we didn't even feel like we could do that at that point because everyone was so happy because Liverpool was a great success, right?
Yeah.
I think it's shifted. I think we can do that without it being a negative because it was incredible, but there were still questions to be asked about that. And so I think the game's changing, and I think if we get that level of consistency where we can start actually talking about the game in its full format as well as putting everything around it, I think you'll start to shift and get people regularly tuning in. But we haven't cracked it yet.
I think that's what frustrates me as a journalist and as a reporter, in that I always felt it represented, bizarrely, along with darts, the sport that I could get my hands dirty with early, and I knew the teams were all really up for cooperating. I could work closely with England Netball. We could speak to players who were jumping at the opportunity to come into the studios at Sky, even back then, or just have a quick phone call and kind of preview a game or things like that. So for me, it does come down to broader media as well. I feel like we haven't seen anywhere near enough in mainstream media of what's going on. This is a brand new era for the sport, and I've not read anything in sort of publications that I would consider the types of places that would write about kind of interesting stories. And that doesn't just mean Team X have never beat Team Y. That does also mean player C has done this in their career and is now juggling. Iona Christian, for example, who's come back so impressively after having a baby. 1 million of these girls are always juggling professional careers. If there's lifestyle stories you want, they're there. And then there's a massively I don't know, massively exciting first step on this journey. So for me, it will always come down to sort of mainstream media being able to tell those stories. I think there's a duty to do it.
And I think that's why, I am still so pro Sky about everything. They've been in it from the beginning. And as you know, they've gone above and beyond to push the agenda with lots of different things. There's some people in there that are super passionate about the sport that are continuing to bang that drum and to try and do it differently. We've got a long way to go across the board on everything. But I do think they have been forefront and centre in trying to do that. And you're absolutely right. I don't know how we get the others on board, because I remember even as trying to give content for nothing.
Yeah.
Literally, I was doing stuff for free with some outlets, which again was linked with Sky, who were trying to push the agenda, who were trying to do things. And you'd get a journo that would be absolutely invested in it, and then suddenly they'd be taken off to do something else, and that'd be it. You'd never hear from him again. And it's really it's been really interesting behind the scenes to see that, and to see that the momentum started and it never followed on. And I think it's fine as doing these surveys, but I don't know how realistic you can take them, because if we'd had 5 years of consistently netball throwing up on people and it still wasn't popular, I'd go, okay, fine. But we haven't. We literally haven't.
And I kind of, that's where I come down on it. I think Women's Super League, the Women's 100 in particular over the Men's 100, and certainly Women's Rugby as well, are three sports that have really prospered over the last 2 to 3 years, to the point where I think most netball fans would now sit there and say, blimey, these are kind of competition for us, like in terms of what I want to go and watch and what I want to see. But those sports have had consistently, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories a week thrown at them. And I think netball offers that opportunity. There are 8 teams, there are 10 players on each team, and as we've seen, there's a lot of injuries, so there's other players coming off the ranks. There's a million and one stories that the sport can tell, but look, you and I know this, so we don't need to continue on. We'll circle back to you shortly, Tamsin, but I wanted to chat to you a little bit about the Super League weekend as well. Round 7. Can you believe that we're halfway through this Super League season already? We usually take these game by game, so I'll do the same with you, because you're my guest this week. So I kind of think we'll start at the obvious place, really, which was the last game of the week. I did my rerun of rerun of the game this morning. Thunder and Mavericks. Firstly, I think maybe a lot closer than people thought it might be. Obviously, as someone invested in the game, what were your takeaways from it? Because on the outside looking in, a bonus point defeat was, it's not the result you wanted, but it's kind of the next best thing.
I was happy, and I said this to the squad afterwards. I was very happy. If you think of how far we've come within such a short period of time, we got pasted by Pulse. We put up a good performance against Loughborough, and we could have won on Monday night. We pushed Thunder right to the limits. They had to change. I think they went through 4 different attacking combinations. We won a hell of a lot of ball. And there were moments where just probably a lack of inexperience from our guys. And again, I talk about that young attack end. It is young, and it's also young in experience as well. I say this all the time. Ellie Ratto at centre, she's in the England programme, so she's goes off a lot with England. She still hasn't done a full season at centre yet. Even last year she was injured. She was out for quite a few games for us. So she hasn't had that 60-minute, so when you're coming up against like a Nat Panagari or players that have done that for such a long time, we've got players that are learning on the job. So Susie Liversidge, like how incredible she was she's been for the last few weeks. I'm absolutely loving working with her. I mean, I'm so impressed with how quickly they're shifting and moving, because you're right, I don't think anyone would have given us the time of day going up to Thunder, and it's a away trip and it's always a nightmare, and it's on a Monday and they're on the bus for hours or whatever, and they were good. They were really, really solid, and showed us that on any given day they are there or thereabouts now.
Thunder look like they're evolving as well. I saw them against Pulse the week before. You mentioned it earlier. We're seeing Nick Smith come into things a little bit more. We know they're still a little bit light at their attack end. So I think I said to Karen after the game, to still be in amongst it and not lose touch, even though they've kind of had a lot of injuries, like yourselves actually, you have had so much to deal with. I think it's pretty important for Thunder, but they are always going to be a team who are there or thereabouts, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, and that history, you can't. I keep saying this to our group. You can't. There's some things you can't blag. So Thunder have always been that team that are there and thereabouts. So regardless of whether they've had the super strong lineup that are untouchable or a group of sort of younger players emerging through, they are consistently, they understand their role, they understand their culture. Like, it's credit to them to what they've done over the years. They are just a really successful team. And, I feel for Greggy. I texted her at the start of the season when her injuries kept coming in, and she repaid the favour when I asked it, because it's I did an interview with her for Sky Sports News on Monday, and I was like, "Are you at the end of your what ifs list yet? Like, Jesus, like you literally couldn't have counted for the things that they've been through, and the same with us, and Panthers, in fairness." So you end up going, okay, well, what's the next plan? What's the next plan? And credit to them how they bring through their academy players as well. I mean, it's no disrespect. Like, I think we could have won that game on Monday, but we didn't, because it was Thunder and because they are so good at what they do. And in the last quarter, they came at us and we didn't have the answers, and hopefully next time we will. And I think I was happy, which is rare when we lose, but I was actually relatively happy. And yeah, Thunder are going to be in that top four. Thunder are going to be one of the teams to beat at the end of the year, and rightly so. They've got some quality throughout their group.
Chloe wouldn't let me off this if I didn't ask you, but talk to me about Susie Liversidge. I think we've seen a real evolution of a player this season. I think most people would have had her down as a goal attack, but we've seen her play wing attack. I saw her play centre for a bit in the Pulse game as well. For me, she's been one of the standout stars of the early weeks of the season. So, A, how pleased are you guys with her, and B, what was kind of behind that, I suppose, permanent transition?
I love working with wing attacks. Susie's a dream to work with. She's so cool, and she wants to learn. I remember when we were signing people, and everyone was like, "Why are they signing like 5 goal attacks?" We're like, "We're not. We're definitely not." Susie, I spoke to her agent, and they'd had a conversation about positions that she wanted to play, and she wanted to move out the circle, and it's something I could relate to. Right, I did the same thing myself. And with wing attack, again, you need time there, especially when you've played goal attack. It's not actually a straightforward transition. So they talked really openly about that. And I was like, that's cool. If you come to us, we'll play at wing attack. I won't put you in the circle. We've got enough cover there, which we have. And I think it's allowed her to flourish because she's owning that position, right? And I think that's another thing, like, there's some specific stuff. Like, I was actually speaking to Izzy Phillips about this as well. Sorry, I go off track because this is what I do. But like, there's certain positions that take time. So if you look at any of the wing defences in the SSN and in our league, the next closest age to Izzy is 24, and most in SSN are like mid to late 20s. Izzy's 19. So it's such a specialised position that you learn as you go along. And it's the same with wing attack. And I think what's been the beauty of having Susie is, A, we had her a lot in pre-season, so we're able to work with her. B, she's quality anyway. Like, she had all that in her. She's been given an opportunity to thrive. And I'm very mindful that when you attack, same with Cam and Mickey, that we allow them to play how they want to play. So that sort of fearlessness. And I think you're starting to see that with her. She's absolutely making that position her own, and she always had the feed and the vision in her. You've just given her the opportunity to go there, and that's what's brave about players moving, right? Because she was at Panthers last year, which she absolutely loved, and she was in that squad, but she's sitting behind Jess Shaw, so you're not going to get that wing attack opportunity, and now you've got it, and she's grabbed it with 2 hands, and I think that's a massive credit to her and to her agent and how they've worked on what they wanted, basically.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think it's something we're looking forward to getting into. I'm sure you guys as franchise directors won't be looking forward to off seasons and the rest of it, but I think for Chloe and I, and hopefully sort of broader media, to be able to kind of talk about how moves come together and things like that. So to get an insight into that, especially around Susie, because I think it's been one of the more fascinating insights this year, or moves this year, has been really interesting. Onto the leaders, Pulse and Dragons. Pos, in the end, pretty comfortable winners, but I described it in my report as a game that was never really particularly comfortable. Dragons kept kind of coming back. Although Pos never trailed, but they never felt in control to me. And I sometimes think, as a coach, how do you deal with that? Because yes, it's great to come away with a win, but really, maybe you haven't seen all the things that you want to see. What were your takeaways from what was a pretty strong performance from Dragons? I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. What you can't play anybody in this league and play badly and think you're going to win. That's the first thing. So yes, on paper, just like us turning up at Thunder or Dragons turning up in Pools, everyone decides who's going to win beforehand. I get that. But I tell you what, you give anybody an opportunity and they will go at you. With Dragons are quality. They've got quality across the court. Watching Pools, three things for me, and I don't know this personally, this is what I'd say, as someone who's been in a position where you are smashing everybody and you're expected to win the league, sometimes it's hard to consistently put out the performance every single week. And honestly, it looked like that. I watched all the turnover and I was like, that was more Pulse than it was Dragons, if I'm being really honest. There were some key players in there that were on their standards, not at their very best. And I've seen them play at their very best this season. So I would say it was more that they played lots of different combinations. You cannot take that away from teams. It's no discredit to anybody that comes off on the bench, but most teams have a starting seven and will use players for impact, or if they're in the lead or they need to change something. And I think, that always unsettles teams. It does. It's very hard to put on all 10 in lots of different positions and expect everybody to be seamless and faultless. It just seemed like one of those games, and Dragons got a bit of a sniff and they let them in and they went at them, and I love that. And why wouldn't they? Like, why would you not want to? And teams at the bottom like that are dangerous because like I said, the gulf is not as big as it used to be now. So yeah, I wouldn't. I looked at it. It was a bit of a nothing key for me. I thought Dragons played very well. I thought Pulse I'd look like a team that just had to get through the game.
I think there were two things that stood out for me. One, I think Cardiff, when they got close, and obviously naturally it was coming into the end of the quarters, their super shot strategy is something that I still feel needs a little bit of refinement. I think there are a few teams who are in that position. We know Georgia Rowe's strengths. We know what she's about. Chelsea Beard came on in the third quarter, having not played any of the game, and kind of missed her first two or three super shots, which Pulse then punished down the other way. How do you think, not necessarily just Cardiff, but maybe other teams who've struggled with maybe their identity in the last 5 minutes, how do you think teams find a way through that? Because it's really tricky, right? You guys didn't know that the super shot was going to be part of things when you were recruiting, so kind of that's a really difficult element of it.
Yeah, I do get that, but I'm still in the firm believer that I'm not sure everyone would have suddenly recruited differently, because I tell you what, if there's shooters out there that can suddenly all shoot from the edge, why the hell didn't we sign them anyway? It would save a lot of ins and outs and swings around the circle. So and also like you can. Thunderbirds won a grand final without putting a super shot last year. So I think we all need to just be a little bit more, everybody's got their strengths. That's like saying, it's like putting Fumi in any team. She's going to win you ball, right? But not every defender can do what Fumi does. Paul's strategically able to do something because of Fumi's strengths, which every other team can't do. So you tactically have to build up a picture. You can still win games with the super shot involved, with only having one shooter that relies on the super shot. And to be honest, if you're relying on the super shot to win games, it's a problem in itself. And we've talked to our group about that. We've come on off the back of some results that have fallen our way that may not have. And that wasn't our plan, to super shot the hell out of the last 5 minutes of the quarter and think that was a good idea. But there's so many different elements to it. If shooters are feeling on, who they're shooting against, there's all kinds of stuff. The defense of it will get better and better. I think that's what you're going to see more of here, because it has allowed some teams to blow out early on in the season, I think, when everyone was like, oh wow, everyone's just going to shoot these. But I think you are finding that people are getting more tactical about how they use it in each of the last few minutes. But I don't, with or without the super shot, I think Pulse would have won that game regardless. So I'm not.
I did the maths. They would have won it by 3 without the super shots.
But that takes into consideration that we added in the super shots, which they would have taken, and so this is where it's really hard, right? I know you can just take away the points and say, well, this would have been this, but actually, it wouldn't have been that because
it doesn't work like that, does it?
Just see what I mean? So I just think I think each team will evolve and find their style, and maybe Dragons will go out next year and go, well, I want 2 goal attacks, so we're going to shoot distance because that, and then if we could all find those, then we'll all go for them, I should imagine.
It's a very fair point, to be fair. I hadn't considered it like that. Of course, these people who can shoot from miles out grow on trees, don't they? They're
some of those. That's great.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Every single time, 100% and not miss ever. I just want those ones. I mean, it's just outrageous. And I talk to my shooters a lot about it. Like, we have a strategic plan, but at the same time, and Rach Dunn used to say this all the time. She's like, if I'm on. Like, just leave me. Like, you can't tell me. And I'm like, okay, she used to do that at Fast 5 because there is a tactical element, but there's still a huge amount of pressure on these people to deliver. So they've got to feel it.
I think that's really true. I remember speaking to Sophie Kelly before the season started, actually, and she's obviously proved to have quite a hot hand. She was good at the weekend. But I said to her, how do you kind of know if you're in a groove to be able to shoot from long range? And she just went, you just kind of know. Like, she said, I can't really describe it. You put a shot up and you feel good about yourself and you get into a rhythm and you get comfortable. And I think we're seeing that, right? We're seeing it with El Murray, Rolene, even Liv Sheen, Nicole Bree. We're seeing it with all these players. They find an area where they're comfortable and they're consciously trying to get themselves into that position because they trust themselves, which is what you want from elite athletes, to trust themselves to do something, ultimately.
We talked about 3 hotspots at the start of the season. Where are your hotspots? And, but then you can talk about that all day long. You might not get there. So, and also, I think there's a level of experience with it. Like, I was quite intrigued watching Helen Housby with Grace because she's now going periods of the game where she's not shooting as much as she did. Yet she still gets in there and nails the big shots when it matters. There's a whole mental shift in this as well. And I think that comes with time and experience. Like, you look at the growth of a player like Liv Sheen, and a lot of that is down to how many minutes she's had on court and how many exposures she's had. And suddenly she's like absolutely blossomed into this incredible shooter who no one can touch at the moment. Her super shots are incredible, right? But you have to give her time to develop that. And I think there's so many variables to this super shot thing at the moment. I think you've got to give it 3 years for tactically and the teams to settle into it and everyone understand what's going to go on. Which is why I think we don't overkill it at the minute. We just kind of ride with it and go, oh, that was good.
I think so. And also, we spoke about this when we were chatting about coverage. It gives us something to talk about as well, right? You want to be able to talk about different things, whether it's tactical evolution, whether it's luck, whether it's a hot hand that's not a hot hand in any particular. These are constant talking points. It all feeds into the debate. On the subject of hot hands, Loughborough seem to be finding their feet. They not struggled, I think that's harsh, through the first few weeks of the season, but 72-68 win over Panthers. That's 3 in a row now for Lightning. You got a closer look at them a couple of weeks ago. Where do you think Lightning are? They're obviously the 2-time defending champions, which when you are up that high, we've seen it with a Real Madrid, a Barcelona, whoever, you are there to be shot at, right? Like, the standards are always difficult. Where do you see Loughborough? Because to me, they just seem to be rounding into the right kind of form.
Yeah, they are. If you look at their centre pass to goal from that game, I think after quarter one, they were 95% and 92% until the end of the game. Like, I mean, to shot, that is centre pass shot is huge. And I did my analysis on it this week for Sky. That will go out tomorrow. About
we'll make sure we plug that for you.
It'll be on my Instagram. About their centre pass, because almost the writing was on the wall for Panthers, because even though their centre pass was high as well in quarter two, they weren't easily getting it through. They were having to work it around, play backup loads. Whereas Loughborough, when you start looking at them, it's actually a really interesting game to go and look at them, how slick they were in their attack end in terms of how they're connecting with each other now. And they're all starting to do it. Berry with Nat P, Hannah Joseph with Sammy, like, it's all starting to come together. I think Loughborough will always be tactically strong. Their defensive pressure on the third line is exceptional, which is what I'm looking forward to them doing against Thunder this weekend. I can't wait to see that matchup. But they are what I would say stable. Pools for me have the extra.
Right.
Loughborough are stable. Thunder are still finding their feet just because of everything that they've had. But I won't write Thunder off in a finals time, ever.
No. Well, I said that. I think when we were doing the season start, I said for me, like the first sort of couple of weeks, months, maybe even, and they use this in American sport. It's just about getting to the tournament at the end of the season, and that's the playoffs, right? Like if you've got a lot of injuries, and one of the first things you said to me was actually it doesn't matter where you finish, and sometimes you might be better off finishing fourth or second or third because you match up better against teams. So I think being able to put yourselves in position for me, I think Lightning. And I asked Vic Burgess about this, whether it was a conscious decision because they had to make changes in defence, losing Nick Smith, and in attack with Mary going over to Australia, whether it was a conscious decision to keep Nat P, Hannah Joseph and Beth Cobden together as their mid-court. And why wouldn't you, right? They're proven, they're experienced. And I think now you're seeing the benefit of that because as the attack ends start to get a little bit more comfortable with each other, Sammy Wallace-Joseph has pretty much looks fit. She looks as fit as she's looked, I thought, at the weekend. And then you've got Jodie and Shadeen who offer you brilliant options from goal defence. I think if that mid-court bit, and you've illustrated it perfectly with your centre pass reference, I feel like now that is all going to come together, and I'm fascinated to see how that evolves, not just against Thunder, but over the second half of the season in its entirety. One outstanding game, and that was, let me get my notes, what game have I missed? Rhinos and Forest. I feel this was kind of a sneaky big game last weekend because I felt it was two teams who, if they can get on a run, will maybe fancy their chances of gate crashing the top four. It was Forest who got the win. And Forest don't seem to do things easily. They score loads of goals and they concede loads of goals as well. So I kind of don't know what to make of Forest. So I'm fascinated to pick your brains on this. What have you seen from them because we've seen 7 games now, right, against everybody. What do you think of them?
I think they are showing the signs of a young new team together that could be really exciting. They're really exciting to watch, right? The ball they turn over is cool. The way they take it down the court. They can play really fast netball, really exciting flair netball. So I think as a kind of style they want to play, you can exactly see what they're gonna be doing. That comes with consequences, right? Because you can't make up for the connections I talked about earlier. When I talk about stable with Loughborough, I'm not saying they're boring. I'm saying they know everything. They know their ins and outs. They know where people are going to be. They know what they're going to do. Whereas I think with Forest, you're never quite sure. And that's how I feel with Mavericks sometimes. We're not quite sure yet, just because you're still building some stuff. So, I've been really fascinated by what they're doing because I think they have moments of absolute brilliance. I loved our game against them because you had to really think about the stuff that you were doing. But that game was interesting because it seesawed, didn't it? Like Rhinos seemed to be completely in control and then suddenly bump. But I think you'll always get that with a team like Forest because when they do play with so much flair, and they're almost better when they're behind because then they've got nothing to lose. I mean, they did it against us. We went up and we were really comfortable after the first quarter, and they put Bree Grierson on, and their centre pass was mental. I was like, oh, you're going to have to stop that. It just was like ping, 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 and they just didn't care. They just let go of ball. And, we had to look at that half time and revisit it and stuff. So I think you'll always get that with the team, that they won't ever give up. They're that team now, and they are exciting. They'll always get a hand to something, win something, which will show us that momentum. But I love the kind of way they're trying to play, even though sometimes it can be a bit kamikaze, because that's how netball should be. Again, it should be exciting.
I described them as playing with a swagger the other day.
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
Well, they're a cool team, aren't they? They've got the bragging rights, they've got the football, they've got the kit, they've got this thing, they've got Chelsea as a coach. I mean, they're cool, and they're acting like that as well, which is brilliant. That's what I want.
You want identities, don't you?
Yeah,
you want identities. Like
definitely.
That's like in any sport. Like you want identities. Rhinos, though, it feels for me like Rhinos are kind of almost there or thereabouts. I'm not quite sure. I was fascinated to talk to Lauren Palmer a few weeks ago. She got such a clear frame of reference for what she wants her team to be. This is obviously not her team because you came in quite late. It feels to me that they're kind of maybe struggling a bit to find an identity. Is that a fair point, do you think? We've just spoken about Forest having an identity.
Yeah, but again, like it's easier to come in new, isn't it? It's a bit like us with Mavs and the same with Forest. You build something and then you create that. I think with Rhinos, it's been a roller coaster for them for the last few seasons. They haven't been able to maintain or stable. I know they've got Joyce now and Jiva down one end, but yeah, I think just with everything they had coming into the season, Lauren coming in so late, like it's just it's a tough one. But you wouldn't write them off against anybody because with the two ends that they've got, and I'm a massive fan of players like Cassie Howard, Beth Britton. I think is class. They've got two really young, exciting English goal attacks. So there's a lot in there, but it just might take them slightly longer. But yeah, I tell you what, you can't. Well, as we found, you can't play badly against them because they will absolutely punish you.
Yeah, there's never they don't give you anything, despite not admitting that mistakes were kind of what was costing them. No one makes mistakes deliberately, right? It's sometimes they're forced, sometimes they come about in different ways. So I think that kind of just leaves us with a league table that it's kind of getting a little bit defined. It looks like we've got three teams in the top. Tamsin, we've got Pulse, Thunder, and Lightning. We've got Mavs who make up the top four, and then maybe a Forest, the Rhinos, and the Panthers if they can get on a roll, who might fancy their chances. In terms of the way the season stacks up, we've also got a bit of a change in the final series this year, right? It doesn't work the way it used to, so it's not first against fourth, second against third. Will that make a difference? We mentioned about kind of getting into the tournament. You've kind of been there and done it. Does the fact that we might have kind of potentially kind of 2 or 3 meetings between the same teams in that back end of the season, will that make a difference to them?
Yeah, I love it what they do in SSN, and I think it works really well. And I also think you should be rewarded for finishing first and second. So to have a double shot on making the final, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. So I'm a big fan of that. Again, we will make stories of everything, right? You have a week off, and suddenly, oh God, it would have helped if you played a game the week before. Like the reality is, when finals come, it is just down to that day. The matchups will matter, how people perform under pressure. How many times have we gone, oh, our team's gone unbeaten all season, and then suddenly they lose in the finals. Like it's never as clear cut or easily written, because finals bring out really strange performances in people, good and bad, all the time. So yeah, I think I really quite like it. Have a proper look at teams, keeps the edge. Like I say, reward the top 2 for being in that, and keep more interest as well, which is ultimately what we want.
I've got a few questions for you, just then we'll save them for the end, Tamsin, but it's probably worth spinning on to the weekend's matches. 4 really kind of fascinating looking matches, and the first question I wanted to ask you was maybe a bit more of a general one. This is like the reverse of round 1. Round 1 was obviously brand new, so I don't know how much we can read into that. What do you think the teams take away from that? Will they look more maybe at the body of work, which feels like an obvious answer over the last 7 games, or will they kind of draw anything from those day 1 matchups?
You still need to see how you matched up with that team at the start. But yeah, lots of things have happened in the last few weeks. So I think ultimately you still break down the team as you have done. You look at what they've adjusted and changed, because everyone's done that. Some's been forced because of injuries. Some has tactically they've evolved. So I think you look at all of that. You can't just start from scratch halfway through the season. So, you are kind of going back to that first game, going, okay, what worked, what didn't work? How do we attack them this time? How have other teams done it? And I'm also quite mindful of, use the Pulse example again. I often don't look at what a Pulse defence does to other teams, because they're Pulse. They got Fumi. So unless suddenly you've got her, they kind of become a little bit irrelevant to you working out how they break down other teams. So I think that becomes really important. But yeah, I think there's still an element you can take from the round one. I think there's still parts there where you go, okay, well, they were successful because of X, Y, and Z. Even though there's been quite a few changes, you still, like I say, never start from scratch.
So it's maybe a bit easy to say it, but it certainly looks like Lightning against Thunder is the game of the weekend. Nick Smith is back. Obviously, she'll go against their former team. So will Shadeen. Where do you think this game might be won and lost? I think there are key battles everywhere. You can't kind of almost pick out one, but I'm going to ask you to anyway. So, where do you think the game might be crucial?
Yeah, I think it's going to be on the Loughborough defensive line. So Beth Cobden up against Emma Rayner or India Massa, and how Shadeen or Jodie do against either Omore or Shannon or Anya out there. I think that was where it was quite interesting for Thunder this on Monday, and how great they are, by the way. To be able to change 4 different attacking combinations and still get over the line just shows how slick they are and how they understand their roles and their structure. Greggy might argue that sometimes and say it's not always perfect, but they were good. So that for me is going to be a mass one, because that's where Loughborough look at winning balls. Like when you look at other teams, Rhinos predominantly win most of their ball in the circle. Pools predominantly win most of their ball in the circle. They slow things down on the edge, but they'll win a lot in there. Loughborough win quite a lot of ball on the outside, or at least the pressure that comes from that outside that allows the defence to come in and have a go at stuff. So I think that's going to be really interesting about how they stop Thunder there.
I also think there's another good game that has got kind of connotations maybe beyond this season. Panthers against Rhinos. And I think Panthers, this is a big game for them, because if they can get a win in this game, they've still got that game in hand over Cardiff Dragons, which I think means that you can't rule them out of kind of being in the mix for that sort of top 4 race. Rhinos won this game in Sheffield earlier this season, but it feels to me Birmingham might just be in slightly better form, even if kind of the table doesn't say that. Again, where do you think this one might be won and lost?
Yeah, Panthers are so hard to take the ball off. So I think that's going to be the absolute key. I don't think they can just rely on Jiva trying to shut down Ziggy. That's not going to happen. And, we saw it in Loughborough. All of Loughborough's stats shouted that, when you have that kind of centre pass attack to goal, you win the game, and they only won by 4. I think there's an element of Panthers are relying on the super shot as well, and they're very good at it. Betsy Creek, now they've got Gabby Sinclair back. I think, they're so difficult to take the ball off. It will be what they can do out the front there, and whether Rhinos can actually shut down the super shot will be the difference. But I think it will be a Panthers win.
Yeah, I think Panthers look good in this, and I wanted to get your thoughts on Betsy Creek a little bit as well. She seems a player who's been a little bit transformed this year. She's really kind of taken on the leadership role that she seems to have within that group. She's responded to the super shot as a challenge. She looks to me like someone who went away, worked really hard on their game, and has come back and been a real asset to the Super League.
Yeah, and also when you're given the opportunity, let's be honest, if Gabby Sinclair had been fit, Betsy would have played a big part on the bench. They might have been bringing her on for super shot, but they would have probably been finding their feet with the Gabby and Ziggy combination. So I think sometimes players just need the opportunity and absolutely thrive, and she's done that, and they've kind of worked out how she fits into that as well. And like I said, she's so calm on the ball. That group, they just are good at keeping the ball alive. Jess Shaw is so good in terms of that. Like, she's always available. She's always coming back, propping back. And Betsy, it's kind of opened up her game as well. And you can't leave Ziggy, right? When Ziggy's under that post, she's again so difficult to take the ball off. So yeah, they've found a really nice kind of group, and I think they're using it very well as well. They trust Betsy to go in the back too, which I think's been really good.
I'll save your game for last. So the other game is the second game at the Motorpoint Arena at the weekend. So if you're in Nottingham, there's a chance to take in 2 netball matches this weekend. Forest against Pulse. I was really excited by this game in round 1, and it ended up kind of being a bit of a blowout. I think it has the makings of being something very different this weekend, because that swagger that we've described Forest as playing with, and Pulse just kind of maybe finding a way through the last few weeks, which is a good thing. If you're a team that are challenging, you're not always going to have it your own way. I think it looks like a fascinating contest on paper.
Yeah, I think defensively, Pulse. I just wouldn't. Pulse when they want to can step up to all kinds of levels. Don't get me wrong. Every team's got holes. So you can always find holes, but you have to consistently play exceptionally well against them to beat them. And I also don't think you'll see as many changes from Pulse this weekend. So don't underestimate what that looks like when they have their 7 on there that spend some time out there for a while. And I'm not sure anybody's got the capabilities of taking Fumi out of the game yet for long enough. I think that's what people will have to do in come finals time. But right now, yeah, I mean, it will still be a great game. But I just think that the way the Pulse defensive line are playing and having a bit more stability, they will take it to Forest.
Yeah, my feeling on this is that I felt that over the last few weeks, defences have not found a way, because that's not fair, because Pulse have won their games, but have kind of matched up, found a way of making things difficult for Pulse at the attack end. Liv's been fantastic, obviously, but there have been moments where she's just taken a little while to find her groove, and I think Pavlin and Pekova has got the makings of something really special in defence, but whether they've got enough experience just yet, I think is probably where you're kind of coming at it way more professionally than me, and sort of saying that's, yes, they could cause them some problems, but maybe not enough over 4 quarters of netball.
Yeah, I think that's more the piece of it, isn't it? Can you do it for 60 minutes? And you never know. Pulse are beatable. That it's not like they're completely untouchable, and I think they've shown some chinks. I just think they'll be in a different mindset this weekend, and that will actually be a real test for them as well, won't it? I don't necessarily think it was them being found out against Dragons. I think there was a mindset piece in that as well, looking at it. So yeah, it'll be an intriguing game, and some of the matchups, when they're both playing with so much flair. I mean, it should be a real classic game to watch.
Yeah, it should be a good one to watch. And you guys are back at Hertfordshire Sports Village this weekend against Dragons, who, as we've discussed, present kind of a challenge, and it's a hard one really, because a team that may be fighting for their life to get a point or a victory, or in Dragons' case, every single quarter. How do you guys go about approaching that? I think I know the answer, but every challenge is the same, right? You do it properly.
Yeah. Well, I think for us it's a bigger test as well. If we really want to commit to top 4 and we really want to get in there, then we need to stamp our authority at some point. So actually, almost you're playing your Thunders and Loughboroughs are sometimes slightly easier in certain ways, because there's less pressure. So this will be back at home. More pressure for the group, obviously, because they'll want to win it. And like I said earlier, you can't play badly, or Dragons will take you. There's lots of areas where they match up. I think Elle McDonald's getting better and better. I think now she's fully fit. I think Chawani in the middle is exceptional. Batten Dyke again, so hard to take the ball off. So I think it'll be a good matchup for us, and a real good test and a real good game to see where we're seriously at. Obviously we're going out to win it. But like you say, Dragons will see this as a game where they can come with nothing to lose and throw everything at us. And almost we kind of need that, because, we need to be challenged in different areas, and you need to be exposed at this point in the season. You need to start seeing where your weaknesses are. So it'll be a really good game. It'd be nice to be back at home. Love being at HSV. And yeah, with where the team's at the moment, I'd hope they go into the weekend really confident.
And 4 of the next 5 for you guys, I think on the face of it, are games that if you can get results out of them, it's against teams that are kind of around you. I will always make a storyline out of a league table, Tamsin, so don't worry about that, and a fixture list. But if you take sort of the Pulse Wembley occasion, which looks like being a fabulous occasion, you've got Dragons, Rhinos, Forest and Panthers over the next sort of 5 game weeks. As a team, do you look that far ahead as a squad and as a franchise?
Yeah, well, you've said it already. There's 3 teams that are given into the top 4, and the rest of us are all fighting for it. So I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing. Like, when Forest got that win against Loughborough, it's like, it blows open everything, right? Because you want the teams at the top to beat the teams at the bottom, and then it keeps everything a bit more smoother. So there's all kinds of elements of pressure on different things. I don't think this season's written at all. I think, like you say, Panthers are coming into Rome, Rhinos on any given day, Forest are really exciting, and so are we. So, it's not a case of that final spot is given. And actually, Thunder and Loughborough have both seen that if challenged, they can be beaten too. So I think it's going to be a really interesting run into the season. So it should be. Like, how exciting is that? We've been at this point before where it's like, you kind of know what's going to happen. I don't think we do, which is really cool. The element of the Super Shot gives that sort of part of it as well, because of how everybody's using it at the moment, which is just wild. So I think for us, the plan is you keep beating the teams at the bottom, and anybody above you is a bonus. And where we are at the minute is a really good position. I'd rather be where we are than thinking, God, we have to win this one or we've got no chance, because at some point that will start to happen with everyone. It's like, now it's gone. So I think we are in a good position. We're still growing, which makes it even better, because you think, well, there's so much more to come. But yeah, that's kind of the remit. We need to go out on Saturday. If you want to make top four, you need to beat the bottom of the table. That's what the plan will be at the weekend.
That's okay, right? It's okay to say this. That is okay to be an ambition. And, you mentioned it before. We shouldn't kind of skirt around sort of things like that. It's fine to be ambitious. It's fine to want to beat people.
It's not even ambitious, is it? It's just like, why would I think we could make top four if we're not going to go and beat the bottom of the table? And if we don't, we put ourselves in a really risky position, because suddenly you've got to take a scalp, and that changes everything. So I always talk to the teams about this. If you want to make top four, well, I've done it with all teams. I've sat with teams before where we're going to win it this year. I'm like, cool. So how are you beating those teams? Who are we isolating? Who are we saying is a must-win? Who is a game where it's like we can try some things? Who is we're not even worrying about that team? We're going to focus on us, because that's a really ballsy thing to say at the start of the season. And that's how Paul should be this year. They should believe in that they can win the league, right? So that's what I'm saying. You look at every game differently. For them, playing Dragons is very different to how we face Dragons. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm all about self-awareness, accountability. Why would I ever go, I think you're absolutely going to smash this game. You lose by 20 goals. You've got to pick up the pieces of that mess. Whereas actually you go, this is what I think is going to happen today, and this is how we're going to do it. If we do X, Y, and Z, we actually could. But when you work with a team long enough, you know what X, Y, and Z looks like. So I think, for us, it's a must-win game. We need to go out and stamp our authority on Saturday and know that Dragons are going to come for us. And I'm excited about that. That's professional sport. That's how it should be.
Excellent. Well, listen, I could sit and talk to you all day, and I often do. So thank you for joining us. Before we go, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about yourself. Like many people in netball, you wear several hats. Which hat do you enjoy wearing the most, or do you like all of them?
Depends what day it is.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, you have said that.
You know what? I'd love netball to be big enough where you have one role that is your role, and actually, Mavericks is my full-time job, and I absolutely love that. They've been really supportive of me keeping on the other things as well. Being involved with the England programme was something I was really passionate about, and I was at a stage in my life where I could do that as well. So working with the academy girls and like seeing some of them shine as well, like your Shannons and your Gracies, and like it's just been mega. Having some of those in our programme as well, your Neves and your Timmies. So that's been amazing. Working back with Sonia McCloma, who's a really good friend. I played with her for such a long time. So I've loved that. I've been very lucky that Mavs have let me do that they've let me carry on doing the Sky stuff. Broadcast is not something I want to stop right at this point. I think I have an opinion, and I think that's really important. And I don't think I'm biased in any way. Like, my team will probably listen to this, and I would say it to them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
About that. So I don't know what roles will happen in the future, and I'm also trying to protect myself a little bit. All I've ever done is netball. Unlike others, I can't fall back into being a doctor or a teacher or a lawyer or any kind of normal job, because that's just not how I've never done it. So, do I want to be a 60-year-old coach? Probably not. But I don't know what roles are going to be in netball at that point. So I didn't have the luxury of earning loads of money playing netball. I'm so pleased that we're paving a way for players and girls to be able to do that. But I think for me, it's building a career where I am happy and I love all the roles I do most of the time. It's about paving the way for the next generation as well, and something that I'm super passionate about. I'm never going to give up on netball. I believe that there's still so much more to come, and I hope that at the end of it there will be a role where I can actually properly give back and have helped change the game, even if it's just a little bit.
That's really profound, and I quite like that. But I did have another couple of questions for you. That feels like that would be a good one to end it on. But we spoke about sort of short term and medium term kind of staging points. We've had a couple of conversations, and one really interesting one with Jenny Sinclair from Netball Scoop, talking about kind of where maybe world netball has a role to play in perhaps growing the game on a global scale. Do you think it may be at one point that there's almost a franchise model that works, or whether it's a calendar that kind of allows players to kind of go around the world and showcase their talents in different places? It feels to me, if like a sport like cricket can do that might be something that translates quite well to a really elite bunch of netball players. Because for me, if the top is brilliant and there are eyeballs all over it, it can then start to filter down domestically.
Yeah, you need a calendar. It's as simple as that, and you need the top nations to want to do that. And until that happens, we're going to be in the same situation. And I think it's really difficult. And actually, I think our Super League will thrive by having an international calendar, because we get more access to the players and as clubs, and you'll actually produce talent far quicker than probably what happens at the minute. But in terms of across the board, I'm not talking about Roses, they're doing fine. But, as we know, bridging the gap to that next stage is difficult. So, yeah, I'd all be for a calendar. And then the opportunity of players, playing 3 months in Australia, playing 3 months in England. Why not?
Yeah.
Well, absolutely, why not? It's playing 6 months of the year and then playing a couple of months of international is 8 months of the year. You still get 4 months off. I know as a player I'd have done that. Jesus, imagine. I just live in Sydney for 3 months. I live in London for 3 months. I want to play in a World Cup and a Commonwealth Games. Yeah, that would do me. So I don't, it wouldn't be for everybody, but why not? Why wouldn't we try something that's super exciting? And because we want the stars back as well. And, I think, I think there's scope for it. I don't know whether it will ever happen, but I genuinely think we need a calendar that works across the world.
It does feel like, for me, and I'm fortunate enough to work in and across and with several sports, it feels like if you get that first bit right, and for me, the calendar, I've kind of come round to the way of thinking that I think the calendar for the very top level of the game, which is international netball, right? It's like, okay, well, now where do we fit the next blocks in around that? And then where do we go from underneath that? It feels to me that if the sport's going to be sustainable in any way, it kind of maybe needs to come from the top down, because as you said, and we kind of mentioned it, the tournament in Bedford, there was hundreds of girls and parents there. That's great. And that is really not going to go away, as the kind of stats showed this week. So actually, how do you make them more interested in what's at the very top? That's my kind of big picture take on it. Anyway, enough about that. We haven't solved netball's problems. We've had a good an hour and a half conversation though, Tamsin, and I'm very grateful to you for stepping in and covering Chloe. She's going to be back next week when, spoiler alert, we'll be doing our teams of the season, which I think is something that hopefully will be quite interesting. But for now, thank you for kind of listening to everyone. And obviously, you can find us on your various feeds. You can rate us and subscribe to us, and all that sort of stuff helps. We're blown away by the support that we've had early on over sort of 6 weeks. And Tamsin, we'll see you on Sky, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.